Selecting the color of the year is a meticulous process, far more sophisticated than randomly flinging spaghetti at the wall and hoping it lands on the right shade. Did you know there are so many variables that go into the color of the year? You may be wondering about the process for deciding, and is there durability with the color of the year? Even though we don't have a crystal ball, what might we see going forward? And are we finally done with gray? Well, meet Sue Wadden and Ruthanne Hanlon. Ruthanne has been in the field of interior design since 1994. Her career includes experience in kitchen and bath design, custom furnishings, and space planning. She has focused specifically on color specifications since 2000 as the National Color and Design Manager for PPG Paints, and has consulted on commercial and residential projects using color's powerful influence in representing a brand, transforming a space, and creating an atmosphere, and even providing the personalization and character everyone strives for. As a member of the PPG Global Color Team since 2010, Ruthanne has been directly involved in identifying and translating influencers and the direction of color and design trends as they apply to a variety of segments. She also travels North America and the Caribbean, conducting accredited CEU presentations for architects and designers that showcase PPG's in-depth understanding of commercial and consumer trends. Up next is Sue Wadden, no stranger to colorful conversations, as we had the pleasure of having her on episode 2. Sue began her career as a color expert at Sherwin-Williams in 1998 as an interior designer and color marketing specialist. Today, as the director of color marketing, Sue is the face and voice of color for Sherwin-Williams, responsible for the company's overall vision and philosophy of color leadership. With over 20 years of color marketing experience, she is an expert in color development, palette strategy, consumer, specifier, and commercial color insights, color styling, and trend forecasting. Sue serves as editorial advisor to Stir Magazine for design professionals and takes an active role in interfacing with consumer and trade media on topics surrounding color. Make sure you stick around to hear if these ladies would have chosen this color of the year, or do they have a spinoff that they want to put in their own home? Have a listen. Hello, ladies, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Katie.
Thanks so much for having us.
We're so excited that you're here and that we can have this conversation because it is one that intrigues all designers. Color is always kind of that, it's out there. What do we do with it? What's changing? What's trending? How long do trends last? Who picks trends? I have tons of questions to ask today, and I'm really excited to get into it with each of you. So let's go ahead and start with you, Sue. Color of the year for Sherwin-Williams. What is it? Describe it a little bit to us.
It's a beautiful soft blue called Upward. Color number is 6239. If I could describe it, I would just say it's an easy, breezy, really lovely, like ethereal blue. It's light. And it kind of sounds like the name. It's like this soft sky blue. It's great.
Awesome. And same for you, Ruthanne, color of the year for PPG and a little description about it.
Sure. We went with Limitless, which is also a soft color. I think that's a really strong trend. It is a pale yellow, almost a neutral, and it was chosen because it has grounding energy, but hints at optimism and joy. And we all need a little bit of optimism and joy in our lives.
Yeah, 8% interest rates. People need optimism and joy in life. It's been crazy.
Maybe we should have picked a brighter yellow. Yeah.
Yeah. Right? I mean, especially over the last few years, my gosh, it's been insane just the last year watching the market. And I don't think we've never seen anything quite like this before. It's just fascinating to observe. It's really unbelievable. So let's talk about how we arrived at the color of the year. So, Sue, what drove you to this blue, or how does Sherwin go about choosing color of the year? Because a lot of us, I think, it's kind of arbitrary. It is not arbitrary for anyone choosing a color of the year. Yeah, the intentionality is off the charts. Let's dive into that a little.
Yeah, so we have an annual forecast workshop where we hash out the thing that we're going to talk about, what we're seeing at a macro level, and then how that translates to color. And for 2024, we have been tracking, the sort of convergence of blue and green as a core and central color family. and greens were all about like post-COVID, back to nature, biophilic inspiration. And now that is really translating into this emergence of blues for us. And so we just wanted to like kind of share that insight. So color of the year often acts as that like marker for where things are going. And it sort of functions as not only a beautiful color, but also like this is an indicator. This is where things are going. So watery, dusty blues are going to be really important in the second half of this decade. And so that's why we really chose this as our color of the year.
That makes complete sense. Shed some light on that from your perspective for us, Ruthanne.
Basically what Sue said. So we do a very similar approach. PPG has a team of over 30 stylists that do trending and forecasting and design work for automotive, aerospace, consumer electronics, which is cell phones, appliances, and then, of course, architectural coatings. So those stylists have a year's worth of homework, and they are out there, going to all the major industry trade shows. That's a small piece of it, though, because that's what's already coming our way. The bigger piece is what is the consumer moods and mindsets, and how are we feeling? Because, we like to say we don't choose what the trends are. It's just identifying how people are feeling and then using color associations to either, support them or be, an antidote for like the yellow is an antidote for all the anxiety and the unrest. So that's how we compile them. It's gathering all that information. We have a workshop as well. It's once a year, and share all that information. I think what's interesting to note, though, and Sue, you probably had the same experience for the last 3 years in a row now. So every stylist has 30 minutes to show what they've seen and where they see it going. And again, this is global. And for the last 3 years, every stylist has had almost the same story. It was a little spooky the first year, but I think it really speaks to how much smaller our world has become, and how much more quickly the trends are cycling around, and how things are impacting us all globally at the same time.
Yeah, and how connected we are, for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, if we ever doubted that, I feel like COVID really did change that for us. It increased connectivity in a way that I'm not sure as human beings we're capable of processing in some ways. There's the beauty of it in that we have access to all of this data, and it's real time. But sometimes I think the human nature and just who we are as organic beings sometimes goes, this is just overload as far as what inputs, even just if we limit ourselves and we take out the whole debacle in the Middle East, we just limit this to design. The amount of data in just the design world and pooling it and keeping up with it and knowing what's going on, it's
exhaustive. It is. It's exhaustive.
And
so
it can be
what would
overwhelming
you guys,
too.
very overwhelming, which is why I appreciate that you guys go in and disseminate the colors of the year, because as a designer, it can be a lot, and color is just one aspect of design, right? We have the textures, and then we have perspective, and I mean, it goes on and on and on. And so having one narrowed down area is extremely, extremely helpful. I don't think too a lot of people realize, I mean, as far as trends and what you're looking at, we're looking at fashion trends, we're looking at automotive trends, we're looking at to get to this color of the year, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's this cross-functional team that comes together. And so you get indicators from all sorts of inputs, like Ruthanne was saying, but there's always like a through line. There's a thread, and that becomes like the point of view for each company. And I think that's important. So like when we start talking about all this information, all this data, we are seeing so much more than we were 10 years ago. But you have to have a point of view, right? So it becomes like, all right, I'm putting my toe in the sand. This is the thing I'm going to talk about. And I think that's what's going to be interesting to watch, right? We don't all want to tell the same story. We want to share our insights, but have a point of view. And that's where I think it's going to get really interesting. So while it's validation, if we're all kind of in the same color family and tracking the same things, I like seeing what like PPG has to say about Limitless, right? Because that's their point of view. And I think that's really important for designers.
It's interesting when we go back and we piece together all these colors of the year from all the manufacturers. I often find we get a really beautiful palette, and there's
Mhm.
high tones, low tones, calm tones, things that tend to pull more southwest, which I want to talk about geography in a minute on that and color of the year. But it's really fascinating to see all the views. But out of it, you see a continuity to the point of dusty or calm or muted. I mean, we're not coming out with a bright mango yellow, right? Or we're not coming
Right.
out with that truly vibrant eggplant purple right now. That's just would be way out of line. It's interesting for us to see as the non-choosers who inherit the palette, how there is often a lot of continuity between it. I mentioned geography. How do you juggle geography and color of the year? Do colors of the year play across all geographical regions, or is geography even a factor for you in choosing?
Ruthanne, you want to start this one?
Sure. I think that's an excellent question. And, you bring up, different colors and different selections, and that's part of what plays into it. If we picked a color specific to architectural coatings North America, it might be different than the global one and the one that has to then, resonate with automotive and aerospace. So it is very
Yeah.
challenging to choose that one color that's going to work across the globe and for every segment. But it's because of, like we said earlier, with the world becoming so much smaller, there are still some regional differences, but not nearly like it used to be 10, 15 years ago. Even if you just look specifically to North America, there's oftentimes I'm working on collections in Florida and you would think they were in New England, or ones in Scottsdale that look like something from Chicago, because one, people are more transient and moving from one geography to the other. But the bigger reason is what we're doing now, social media and podcasts and the
Yeah.
information overload. Because what is happening in say Waco, Texas, is all of a sudden very
Yeah.
popular in Syracuse, New York, and because we're all seeing the same things on all these different social media outlets. So, and we're seeing it at the same time too. So, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say, Sue. But we've seen a big decrease in these regional palettes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would say totally the opposite of that for us. So color of the year
That's why I
tends to
love
be,
this.
I know it was a great answer. You would think that that would be consistent across, but what we're finding, like color of the year functions as a little bit of um, the again, that through line of color. Like we want to tell that color story globally, but our teams are finding that regional information is what a lot of designers are requesting. They want to feel like there's a customizable point of view on color. And so, there's like sub markets that we're really leaning into. So like Miami feels very different than coastal Florida and North Florida, which feels very different than Charleston, which is very different than New England, which is different from obviously the Pacific Northwest and Arizona. So I think for our customers, we're getting mostly designers, we're going to get back to a little more regionalism. Not necessarily tied to color of the year because that's such a large campaign, but like
Sure.
in dedicated resources to support. And I just think that's the ebb and flow of where color is. For a long time, everybody wanted to know like the it colors across the globe. And now they're like, nope, this is where we live. This is what we want to know. And this is reflective of sort of the human side of where we live in design. So it's just interesting to track
Yeah.
those
Do you think
changes.
that's being spurred by COVID, like you mentioned earlier, and our connection to our community and either where
I
we
think
are
so.
or where we're from?
I
That would
think
make
so.
sense. Yeah.
And maybe it's a little bit of like trend reaction, like trend overload. It's a noisy space. There are a lot of people that are not just paint brands in this space. So I think designers are like, yeah, this is great. I love it. But tell me more about where I live.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
think that's going to be a challenge to communicate color. Not a challenge, but a great challenge. So, like again, with our forecast teams leaning into the people in the region, the designers in the region, to kind of tell that sort of customized story. I don't know, Katie, what do you think? Do you see
It's
both
a great
sides of
question.
that?
And I'm sitting here and I'm literally straddling the fence like a rabid squirrel because I see both sides of this in every single
Yeah.
way. There's times we definitely need the customization. I will never forget living in Scottsdale probably about 15 years ago. And there was this building, this multifamily building in downtown Tempe, and they put blue. Like I'm talking navy blue before navy became a thing. And I'm like, blue? Have y'all seen any water around here? Like, it
Right.
felt so out of context because, especially then, desert tones, it was so solid in the desert tones and some deeper greens, maybe that like kind of play to a saguaro cactus, but blue, like oceanic blue. And it was very, very jarring. That being said, now I feel like so much of it has changed in that the palettes we're creating it back to those dusty colors that I think Ruthanne mentioned. We're seeing so many of those play even in Scottsdale. We just did a project on Camelback in Phoenix, and it was grays, light blues, greens, the crossover you mentioned, Sue, of the blue green correlation. That's exactly what it was. And so to see that pop up now, it's very, very different. I do think people are transient. And yet I also think people want differentiation. They want to feel, as we see more and more people locked out of the home market and they can't afford to buy at 8% interest rates, and they're going to be potentially in an apartment for their entire lives now, is what the story is becoming. They want a place that does feel unique and special to them. So how do we create that without it being a jarring experience where it would be something they would potentially, if they did own a home, paint their home in these colors? And
Exactly.
so I think it's a big challenge y'all have in front of you. I am very happy to inherit your colors of the year and not be the decision maker behind them, because I think it is challenging. And sometimes you have those, as people do become transient, you have those nostalgic feels. Like, I was born and raised in Miami. I love a good fuchsia. I want to see a vibrant blue. I hear you, but you've relocated and are now going to school, say at ASU in Tempe. Like,
Right.
that's might not be in the scope for you, but there's some sort of meaning. And I think that you both alluded to it. And I kind of want to go this direction with it. The not right or wrong of color, but that it's a reflection. You aren't choosing the trends, you're reflecting the trends. And one thing we always tell our clients is you just have to give us honest feedback. There's no right or wrong here,
Yes.
because it's an emotive, it's almost like a visceral response. You either love it or you don't, and you can't explain why, but there's 100 million reasons that go into why someone does or does not like a color. Yeah, what
Agreed.
would you
And
say to
that's the
that, Sue?
thing. I just think as long as there's a point of view, right? We just have to take that like design thinking and design methodology that designers they just have it in their heads all the time. That's how we're trained. That's how we think. But translating that to a customer and saying, this is, this is why we're recommending it and here's why. And I think that just gives that confidence to say,
Yeah.
if you're willing to try something new, you can go in this direction. But if you want to reflect kind of regionalism and where that's at, you can go in this direction. And I think that's
I
what
love
will
that.
make things, again, good for the client, good for designers, good for the manufacturers that are trying to support these businesses.
That makes complete sense. How does that feel to you, Ruth Ann?
It does make a lot of sense. And I think it's important to note that when we first started doing, we actually resisted doing a color of the year for many, many years because we said you can't pigeonhole that many
Yeah,
people
too
into one
tough.
color. Yeah,
Yes,
so
it's hard.
it's the complete palette, and I know Sue's team does a great job with their forecast. It's not just about the one color, but when you're doing desk sides with media, they say, okay, that's great, just give us one color. So
Right.
that's how we kind of caved and started doing a color of the year, and it's been interesting to watch the how do I say the personality of the color of the year, because it started with, oh, this is exciting, then it kind of turned into everyone's doing a color of the year. Now I'm seeing more people like ask what it is because they're painting something, and we like to look at the color of the year as just a conversation starter. It's just an overview of how we're
I like
feeling.
that.
It's great if you want to use that color, but I will say with some of our colors of the year, while they were beautiful, they weren't applicable in every situation. So I've had some
Love the
projects I've had,
honesty.
and
Love
but it,
that.
like I said, it's not for everything. And I've had
Sure.
some opportunities where I had to say, no, I appreciate that, but we're not going to use it on this project because it doesn't make sense on that. Maybe we'll use a
Yeah.
bit of it over here. But it has been interesting to watch just the perception of color of the year and how it's changed over the years. And I think Sue would agree with me. We think it's great if you want to paint your house color of the year every year. We'll get you paint every year, but
Yeah.
it's more just you know tapping in, especially for a designer resource, to say this is where we're going. So I work a lot with builders, and they rely heavily on us for color direction. And so just having that, okay, we're shifting from warm, we're moving away from the cools and the grays and going here, just having that information is what they look for. Now, do we have to finite it down to the specific color of the year? Not in most cases, but
Yeah.
it's yeah. There's just different ways to look at it and different reasons behind it.
I like what you said, though. It's almost like color of the year is a guiding light. It's not intended to be used because as I'm sitting here and I'm toggling back in my head as you're both talking, and I'm like, I think wasn't urbane bronze a color of the year a while back, Sue, for you
Yeah.
guys? It took
Yeah.
me, and now I love that color, especially for more tired properties where like maybe a tricorn black isn't going to do it, right?
Right.
And it took me a couple years to get on board, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I vaguely recall. I think this was a color of the year, and some of that I'm sure is
Yeah.
just delay and market delay. But that's a huge relief to hear from you guys that we don't have to use that color. It's just meant to be a beacon of this is what is going on out here. And what I love about sitting here at this round table and having this conversation is realizing how much more is going on beyond just this simplified sound bite, for lack of a better term, that is color of the year.
Yeah.
I want to talk about gray. You
Sure.
alluded to it,
Do we have
Ruthanne.
to? Do we have
I
to?
know that's why I want to talk about it, because I have this like innate need to be validated that we are finally done with gray. I feel like gray, once again, we're talking about market indicators, leading color of the year. We all know gray was really born out of the '08 recession, right? Like '08
Yeah.
recession,
That's
everything
exactly
came
where-
gray.
yep.
I mean, heaven help, it was floors, walls, ceilings. I mean, it was ombre gray everywhere. Are we
Yes.
done with it? Somebody please tell me we're done with it.
I'm going to say yes.
So, yeah,
Yes.
I would say that. But I would say
Oh,
this.
we're 2 for 2.
I don't get too excited,
But
Katie.
there's a caveat.
I am.
Let's
I
just leave
am.
it there. Let's just leave.
We,
I was happy with the
we-
period, Sue. We didn't
Right.
have to put in the comma.
So upward is a teeny tiny nod to a little bit of what's coming out of Europe in that it's like a silvery lightness, like a metallic. And I think it's an indicator of where maybe hardware and lighting trends are going to start to shift. So we've seen this darkness, we've seen black, we've seen gold, and it's natural after 5 or 6 years of that cycle to start to see a balance point. And so a silvery metallic maybe is going to start climbing back in. But I just would say this, it's an inflection point. It is a balance. It's not going to become what gray was from 2010 to 2020. That is done. It is warmth. There is too much natural wood in all of our like furnishings and all the things that we're designing with both commercially and residential to go totally gray. I just think that's like we're far. It may happen in 5 years, but for now we're good.
I think
I
that's a
would
great perspective,
agree.
Ruth Ann. Yeah.
I know, I would absolutely agree. You know, we've been in the grayish phase for the past few years, but again, it's I don't want to say regional, but if you haven't built a home or remodeled in the past 6 or 7 years, you start doing research. And what's the hottest colors? Well, you're going to see all these articles on gray because they're not linked chronologically. And so that's a conversation I have a lot, especially if it's commercial properties. And you have to say, yeah, it was very popular, but that article is 8 years old. So, and I'm going to put this on record and say this. I'm going to say the B word. We're going to beige, whether we're,
Yep.
and I see your face, whether we're excited about that or not. But I always, I tell people, we were just talking about this last night at an industry event, it's not going to be the beige we had in the 80s. It's with the seafoams
the graham
and the
cracker,
mug.
where it literally looked
Right.
like you mashed up a graham cracker and glued it to your wall. Yeah,
Oh,
we've all
Totally.
been there.
Now I have a
Yes.
visual in my head I didn't need. Thank you.
I'm
Pete.
so sorry, Ruth Ann.
But coming back, and a lot of that beige is more the taupe with the red undertones. I think this is
Yeah.
going to be more neutral beige, and we're going to
Yeah.
see it with the blue. The blues aren't going anywhere, especially
No.
those muted kind of smoky ones. That's beautiful with beige, with some white trim, maybe a deep urbane bronze or an onyx sort of anchor it. That's the
Yeah.
fresh looking palette. So it's a color we had from the past, but used differently. So it's a conversation I've been having for 3 or 4 years. I think those who specify color, we can all speak to this. We were done with gray 7 or 8 years ago. It's just
Preach.
Completely.
Oh, preach. Yes.
It took a while
Yep.
for it to
so
trickle
intense
down.
for so long that I'm just,
It
Oh,
was
I have
man.
kind of a gag reflex about it now.
depressing. Same. And what's sad is, now it looks dated, and you think of
It
all
does.
these bigger projects. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, it's just a big national chain saying who's going to use gray. And again, from a paint company, all right, let's paint it gray because we're going to be changing it in 3 years. But
Yeah.
we don't want to do that to them. So, but my indicator was, aside from everything else we've been seeing, I had a rep 2 weeks ago who was like, "There's no way grays or beige is coming back," and I got a text from him saying, "Okay, what's our truest beige?" I thought it has to.
Completely.
Because his
It
customer
does.
was
If we
It
asking
does.
converted
for it.
him, the
So,
market has
yep.
shifted.
And he's like,
Well, and I
I
think
will never doubt you again.
yeah, you know what you're doing. This is a good thing. No, and I think too the intensity level. Some of those grays got super deep. We got into charcoals and we got into, but I feel like everything is throttling up. Kind of what you mentioned, Sue, almost like a metallic blue, and back to Ruthanne's word of just kind of a dusty. But it's getting so. I feel like we had such stark contrasts of white on gray and black, and almost that farmhouse motif for a while. And I
Yeah.
feel like everything is just calming down to a softer palette where we're going to have these more sophisticated tones and more warmth, to your point, Sue, about furniture and the wood tones that we're seeing, which gets us back to the beige, Ruthanne. I absolutely, it's going to be
I think
interesting
it's
to see how it all melts together.
Katie, I think it's going to be, so we'll go like a little macro here and socio-political.
Yeah,
Interest rates are high,
please
the
do.
world's on fire, all these
Yep.
crazy inputs are coming in. And so there'll be high highs and low lows. So that high stark contrast is probably going to continue because we are living in sort of this black and white space. If it's not one thing, it's the
Interesting.
other. So that
Yep.
those like that contrast may stick around. I think what we're just going to see is people that are exhausted by that will move towards this like natural, much more refined, soothing, like all the buzzwords that we love when describing
Yep.
color. I think there's going to be one side and then the other. And people will kind of
It's
decide where they
exactly
fit with
like our
it.
political climate right now. There's
A
one
hundred
side and the
percent.
other. It's
Exactly.
interesting the reflection that we're seeing in color to that.
And
And
you're
like, I don't want
exactly
to,
right.
right. Like, we don't want to talk about aggressive colors. We don't want to make them, but reds and pinks and warm colors are rising because of this like kind of turmoil, right? I mean, we haven't talked about red in an appreciable way in, I don't know, since the 90s,
No.
late 90s,
Yep.
early
Front
2000s.
doors, all the front doors.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And now
Yep.
And
it's
all the dining rooms
starting
and kitchens.
to like creep back up again. So I think it's the cycle, right? It's fun to track this cycle. It's important for designers because they need to be the oracles for these projects, but these are good stories to tell.
Ruthanne,
I
are you
agree.
seeing red in yours in warmer tones? Because I want to segue into like what I know y'all don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not going to hold your feet to the
Oh no,
fires
we
on this, but
do. We
Thank
do.
you.
what
Mine's
is
are here.
coming down the pike? Like, what do you see? And knowing that next year we hope to do this exact same conversation about the 2025 color of the year. But what do you think is coming down the pike for us, given that it is an unprecedented time in that we have all the global turmoil that we have. We have all the economic. There's just so many conflicting indicators of,
Yeah, and
well,
next year
inflation's
is
up,
going
but
to be
how
really
do we still have
messy.
8% interest rates? And I feel like there's just so much confusion around so many things because we do have access to all this information at once. How does that sort itself out in the future of color, Ruthanne?
So two things, one, because of all that, we're still going to be craving those quiet, retreating colors. It's a way to take a break. There's a lot of noise in our worlds, whether it's
For sure.
our devices that are constantly alerting us, or you go out in public, and there's stuff, or the news or whatnot. It's just it's and it's 24/7. There's no more turning off at 6 o'clock and just having your life. So that leads us to craving these quiet spaces where we can just decompress and almost creating these sanctuaries. But
I like that
I,
term.
I am seeing, and Sue, you had a great point with the reds coming back. It has been a while since reds have been trending, but I've had several builders across the country wanting to introduce, because all the packages were grays, grays, leaning into beige.
Yes.
And now they're saying, okay, we want to introduce a red, or we need a yellow, or we want to do a terracotta. And the first time it happened,
I love
someone's
terracotta.
playing a joke on me. But
Me
now
too.
I'm having more and more of them. So I
Yeah.
do think those are going to come back. Are they going to take over like graded, or probably not? But
Probably not.
they're still
Right.
very important, and they have their place. And don't get us
Well,
wrong. We're not saying that gray is completely gone. Gray will never go away. It's a classic neutral. It will always have its place. But to just be overly saturated with it, no pun intended, is we've just had enough of that. So it'll still have a
Yes.
place. So those of you listening that love gray, that's great.
Keep
And it
loving
still
gray.
works
It's
for-
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's But
You
as
have our
far as
permission.
the-
Well,
Yes. Keep going.
Well, and I think too, it comes down to the intensity of the gray too. As we come
Yes.
up in palettes and we've gone to more, we see more of the white black contrast, even having a skosh of gray or a white with a grayish undertone.
Yeah,
Thinking like
it's
an
beautiful.
Argos or even like a knitting needle or something like that,
Yeah.
like where you just start
Yeah,
to see these little odes to, but it's not like we're painting our walls in dominant gray,
Right.
And I
It's
think
almost like
it's
it can
interesting
be a
too. There's,
palette cleanser too.
yes,
ooh, I like that.
yes,
I really like that because you have to have that, just like a good glass of wine. You've got to
Yep.
have a
There
neutral. So
you
when you
go.
bring in that red, it's like
Or
that is stunning and
Merlot or
beautiful.
Burgundy.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it gets really
Yep.
fun at that point.
Yeah.
Talk to us about color of the year and how it's different for a designer than it is for a consumer. And how do I, as a designer listening to this webcast, if I have a client coming to me and going, I want all gray, but I want something trendy, and you're like, well, which do you really want? How do we work through all of those tensions between the consumer and the designer world when it comes to the topic of color? Sue?
Yeah, that's a tension point a little bit for us. Ooh, sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Because for homeowners, we want to give them the confidence to say color of the year is the color we believe is the thing you should try. Here's how you should use it. Here's some of the styling that you could consider and using it as a resource. But for designers, we want it to be like, this is what's coming, sort of the indicator, right? The oracle of what they should expect to see. And so like you toggle that line when messaging that. And so,
Yeah.
like that's always like difficult. That's why we have our forecast, because the forecast is really for designers. And the color of the year is taking that forecast and pulling one thing out that consumers can
Yep.
get behind. So
A
that's like kind
bite-sized
of our,
piece.
yes, exactly. It's not so overwhelming.
That's a great answer to that question. How about you guys, Ruth? How does PPG approach that?
I would agree. I think designers look to it as just the overarching theme of it. It might not be the specific color. So,
Yep.
like this direction, going warmer, more comforting, organic hues, that gives you a really big broadcast of, okay, so we're probably bringing more natural wood and authentic materials and getting away from, mass produced and those cooler tones where we've been. Where for homeowners or consumers, it might be, maybe it's not your wall color, but you're going to be seeing this on throw pillows at the big box stores, or it's going to be, accents or accessories or the hot color on Instagram. And just like I said earlier, it's more of just a conversation starter, but it is nice to kind of give a heads up to what's coming. And it depends on the segment as well. Designers know, they're already aware of where things going. But think of the average builder or
Oh.
apartment community manager. They're not paying attention to all that, and why should they? So they're
Sure.
more looking to us for direction on that. So that's where we can come in and say, maybe it's not our color of the year, but we need to use something warmer because that's going to resonate with consumers based on how they're feeling. So
Yeah.
it's an excellent question because different users of it are going to have a different appreciation for it and a different need for it as well.
And Katie, you
So,
alluded to it too
yeah.
in Urbane Bronze when you referenced that. You were like, "Oh gosh, I don't want to use a black on this project. What could I do?" Oh, well, wait, I remember that color. So if a
Yeah.
designer has a consideration for something new, then we're winning because like that's also part of it. I could say that we could have selected a color called Krypton, which is very close to Upward, but it's a little more gray. And it's a really popular color. That would have been an easy direction. People already know that color, but in selecting something a
Sure.
little different, it gives just like it's something new. So I like that part of it as well.
So
I
do we
think they do look
expect
for fresh
colors?
and new in the color of the year.
I think we have to, right? Like, and
Yep.
do we expect those colors because they are fresh and new? Do you, as choosers, expect them to last well beyond that specific year? Or what kind of durability are you looking at of color of the year? 2 years? Sue's
Yeah,
holding
for
up two
me.
fingers. 2 years? Okay, so
At
you want
least
them, so
two.
yeah,
The
definitely
overall
two, Ruthanne.
forecast is more like 5 to 7. But
Yeah.
it's going to change based on the economy. When things are great, we spend money, we take chances, we replace things. When they're not so great, we do, that's why gray lasted as long as it did. There was a horrible recession, and we went to gray because it was safe, and we stayed with it for a very long time. Because remember, like it started to get better, and we were going to duck our heads up. Then we're like, nope, we're staying back here. We're not
Yeah.
ready. So that's in part why it lasted so long. But What I really enjoy seeing is how the colors morph and change. So, like last year, our color of the year was vining ivy, which was a greenish, bluish, in betweenish. And
Yeah.
this year, it's in the forecast, but it's a little bit darker and a little bit more
Yeah.
vibrant. So the story continues, but it has a slight change to it. And in looking back, as a matter of fact, none of us on the global team even saw this. Limitless was in one of our beauty shots for the color of the year last year. And we didn't notice it until we
Interesting.
started putting the CEU together. And we were like, the indicators were there. It was just
Right.
finding it. So, yeah, I think Sue's right. Maybe, 2 or 3 years for the actual color of the year, but at least 5 to 7 years right now for the overall forecast.
Yeah.
I love that. And that gives us the freedom as designers to come back to those colors of the year. Like when I can lean into urbane bronze and go, oh, it's okay. You can do that. It's nice to have the validation and freedom to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
Say
urbane
that again,
bronze.
Ruthanne.
I love urbane bronze.
Right?
Well, thank
It's
you.
a great
it's a good,
color.
it's
I
it's
mean,
just
it's
complex.
earthy, it's dark, it's character,
It's
no offense, I have to give our equivalent, but I get asked about it all the time because
yeah,
it's a
it's a
really
good
great
color.
color.
It's a good color.
Let me ask you guys for your surprise points in putting together the color of the year. I think red definitely coming back is one that's surprising to me. What's coming down the pike that you think we're going to find surprising, even potentially as designers, but for sure on the commercial side, that when designers are getting hit with this from clients, they shouldn't be caught flat-footed by it. Get ready. You're probably going to see X, Y, or Z. What would you fill in the gap with?
Who wants to go
Go ahead,
first?
Ruthanne.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sue.
I love how nice everybody is on this small
So-
table. I love people that know each other's colors and validate. And it's such a
It's
lovely group of
awesome.
humans.
It's a very nice, happy space. But I will say
Right.
this, and purple confounds me. It is a color that I struggle with.
Yes.
It's like I'm a warm
Yes.
color person for sure. Dark colors, I migrate towards those. And so when I read about the digital space and the metaverse and how color is being infused with this blue undertone because we're seeing it through a screen and there's blue light and all these blue. Purple is an important color. And so I just have to figure out the right way to communicate that out because it's difficult to bring into interiors.
So when you
But-
figure that out, Sue, would you please let me know? Because I feel the exact same struggle. I'm not like, oh, that's the killer purple. That's our go-to purple that crushes it every time. Like, nope.
It's rough.
Nope,
It's
can't
rough.
really say I love purple, especially on an exterior, because
Yes.
it never, 1 year later,
It
I'm
is.
like, well, what color is that?
Right. And so my answer to that is taupe, right? Taupe is the answer. Taupe is the application forward purple derivative. It's neutral, but it's got those like cooler undertones, warm,
Interesting.
cool, So that's my answer for purple. But I'm curious,
I'm
Ruthanne,
like
what are you thinking?
doing jumping jacks inside because I was going to say purple as well. But I'm thinking more of the really deep aubergine. So it's not going to be an all over color for every space, but gorgeous on a feature wall or a front door. Now, are we going to see an automotive? Maybe. Wouldn't it be a great cell phone color or even, small appliances?
Oh, it'd be a beautiful color. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That very deep, almost
That would be
eggplant
fun.
aubergine, and so it has a little bit of mystery to it. It's dark and protective. It's a little bit on the retreating side, but it has that inner warmth to it. And it was what? Trying to think when I had my bedroom painted that color. So it's 20 years ago. It wasn't an all over color, but it was being used.
I was going to say, I feel like
lot.
everything runs a 20-year life cycle.
And it seems to be that 20-year mark
Yeah.
is what we're seeing with the cyclical. And then, look when avocado came back. We call it guacamole, but it was the same color and used with different palettes.
Right.
Or look at, I think dark brown is a perfect example. It was huge in the 60s and 70s, and then it went away, and we made fun of it. And then it came back after 9/11 when we needed grounding and comforting. And it was around for at least 10 years. And remember, it was with chocolate and pink, then it went to chocolate and blue, and now that's coming back because biophilia
Yes.
and our need to connect. But yeah,
It is.
I'm with you, Sue, but I'm going to go darker. I'm going to go darker with more eggplant.
Yeah.
So, Katie, your next project,
That could be
a
a really fabulous color.
I know.
We just have to
purples,
get client approval.
purples.
That's it. Just client approval. Front doors,
Yes.
maybe. Well, and that's what's hard is I don't feel like outside of Mardi Gras, there's not really a holiday associated with purple either. I feel like you can put navy on a front door. It looks great, right? That's great. You've got Hanukkah. It can go great with red and green at Christmas. Like there's 100 different ways. But purple is just like, what do you do with that outside? I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Mardi Gras. But what do you do with it outside of Mardi Gras? That's a
Maybe
toughie.
that's why it's
It's a
appealing.
really
It's
tough
like
Because
color.
it's not something that is expected.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I would say like in the French country vernacular, right? On the residential side,
Yep.
it is a
Yep.
beautiful front door color. So if you have that sort of cottagey
Yep.
vibe or a soft blue, it's beautiful. But again, it's not for everyone. It's hard to execute sometimes for specifically a commercial. I'm sure there are people who will
Right.
argue with
And
us
yeah,
for sure that
again, not
love to use
Yeah.
it, but I would
not
love
saying
to
it's
hear
for
from them.
everywhere, but think even like arts and
Yeah, me
crafts
too.
with a very dusty neutral green with the
Yes.
soft off-white
Deep.
trim. That's a palette I actually specify quite a
Yeah.
bit. Our color gooseberry or purple basil is that dark eggplant, and it looks great with the grayish or with that historic muted green, and has that feel to it. So it's a little bit nostalgic as well. But depending on how it's utilized, it can look fresh. I just think it's different. We run, and blues and greens aren't going away, but those, it's like, of course, it's blues and
No.
greens. Like that's where we are, and I don't know. Maybe the eggplant is just different, and I don't know. So, do you think we're ready for a red? I think the dark purple seems the safer gateway color to jump into more saturated.
Yes. 100%. It like red, little touches, little pops, little Barbie moments,
Yeah.
right, if you will, from what we saw this summer.
Love
But
that
it's
color.
not. We are North Americans are very puritanical in their colors. We like a little, like a pretty timeless range, and we don't get too dramatic. So I feel like
Yeah.
that's just going to continue, especially in kind of the environment that we're going to be designing in
Yes,
for the
keep
next
playing
couple
it
years.
safe. And next year is going to be
Well, one thing
very
too is
interesting. So, here in North America. So I
Yeah.
think it's going to be interesting to watch the consumer moods and insights.
tell me
Just
more
the
about
whole
why,
political
Ruthanne. I want to go down
climate,
that path and then
and
we'll circle back.
yeah, it's
Yeah. I feel like for the first time after, we had the 80s, that was predictable. I feel like, you even get to the '08 recession, that seemed very predictable in many regards, right? And there's just so many factors right now, and there's so many hot spots globally that I feel like people are we have friends who've canceled vacations. They're like, we just don't want to travel right now. Like, we want to be at home.
where you feel safe.
We don't
Yeah.
feel ready to do that and go somewhere abroad and right, possibly end up there, not just Middle East, but just really anywhere and think, wow, we could be stuck there. And I think all of that, whether it's subconscious, which I think is the majority of it, sometimes it's conscious when you do cancel those vacation plans, but all of that is going to manifest as we move forward in our choosing of color of the year. What becomes that neutral? What becomes that accent color that becomes a go-to on a lot of projects, regardless of geography even, or trends or architecture. And I think it is an unknown. For the first time, I think COVID, at least especially for me, jarred us into the reality of things can happen we have no control over. There's a lot of unknown. And so then when you start seeing things that aren't coming out of right field, like the geopolitical climate, and then you feel that, it just makes you more reticent, I think might be the word. Reticent to jump into maybe say that gutsy red color. It's like, no, I don't have the emotional bandwidth for that. I'd like to come
Yeah.
back to an uplifting blue or a really timeless beige that's calming and soothing. Like, that's emotionally where I feel safe.
Right. And again, it's like risk versus where your mindset is at. So I think that's just dependent on each person, each project, each program. I think that's where this idea of like customization is really going to be interesting to track. Because there's always noise, right? It's because of social media, because of our global connections, because of who we are. Thank you, internet, right? Like we just see everything all
Whether
the
we
time
want to
now.
or not.
We do.
And so, yeah, like moderating
So
that
true.
is really going to become a personal decision. like, okay, I choose to shut
Mm,
it off, or I choose to like get in and see all the things all the time. So it's a challenge, but
yeah.
also like a great challenge for color, because we're able to tell so many stories
Mhm.
all the time now.
And
It's
it
not
is,
just one thing.
yeah. Nor can it be. Yeah, the idea of a simple world where information is, linear. And I was even reminiscing with my neighbor yesterday. I was like, remember back in the old days when you just got your news on Fridays when you went out to see a movie and they played it before the movie, and it was like you were 2 weeks behind on the war because that's when the reel made it
Hmm.
to your theater. Like I'm not sure emotionally I'm any better off today than they were then, nor can I control it, right? Little old me,
Right.
like not controlling what happens in the Middle East right now. They don't care, thankfully. And yeah, it's just kind of it's going to be interesting to see if people, to your point, Sue, dive in headlong, want all the information, want to sort it all out, want to have their voice heard. And because of social media, everyone has a platform. So there's just, I feel like a lot of yelling going on in an echo chamber about so many things. Everyone finds their own echo chamber where everyone agrees with them, and then they just keep yelling louder
Yeah.
and louder at each other. And
Yep.
so it's going to be interesting to see if people go that way, or if there's people, and this is where I tend to more hang out, I would just say, thank you, but no thank you. I have enough over here. We're just going to shut it all out because I can't change
Yep.
it. I'm going to draw my circle around my sphere of influence. It's very small. It's about 1 foot radius
Yep.
around my big toe. And that's where I'm going to hang out because that's what I can control. And I think it will be interesting to see how color of the year next year, which way does it go? Because I think you're going to find people in those two camps, kind of what you were saying too about we'll always have the highs and the lows, but you're going to start seeing this more subdued, sophisticated as people tend to polarize in yet another area, which is also kind of sad in a
Yeah.
way.
So thank you, Katie, for stressing me out, because we're going to have to start making
I'm
those
so sorry.
decisions pretty
Yeah, pretty
soon.
much.
You just released Color of the Year for
Oh
2024,
God.
but we are looking at 2025. It is an interesting
I'm
conversation.
like
I don't want to stress
twitching.
you guys out. I know. That's why I wanted to have you guys on the show, because I wanted to hear, how do they do this when there's so many variables? It's not two or three, or what did Architectural Digest or whatever have to say about something. It's now a sea of information to sort through, which is why I appreciate you guys' time more than anything in the world. One last final question I have for each of you that I have been curious to know. Would you have chosen this color of the year, or do you have a different color of the year in the back of your head that is a spin-off or takeoff that you want to put in your own home?
Who's going?
I
Ruthanne, you have
know.
to take
This
this
is
one
No,
first.
hard.
I'm thinking,
no, I have
thinking out
a
loud here.
Sue needs some
very
time over here.
clear
Yeah, Ruth Ann.
backup, and it was actually a very strong runner-up at our global meeting. We were putting this together, and it was
Okay.
a really dark aubergine, and there was a variety of reasons why it was chosen. But
It
Oh,
again,
pretty.
was.
is that going to work in automotive? Is that a color that goes across all the segments globally? Because you also have to take in how different cultures look at colors, and like black means one thing here, but it's a different thing in Asia.
Absolutely.
So playing into all that. But the way we landed on Limitless was our moderator, who's fantastic. We had our 3 design boards up with all the palettes for each story, and she didn't say a word, and she looked at us and she pulled Limitless off. It was in all 3 of the stories, which we had never had happen before, and we all won.
Yep.
Like the color of the year
Yeah, that's
picked
how you
itself.
know.
Like
Interesting.
it was right
Yep.
there. It just took her pointing it out.
Yes.
So, but as soon as she said it, we're like, oh, it makes sense. It's the warmth, it's the optimism, it's soft, it's quiet, it's
Yeah.
comforting. If you follow the chakra, it's self confidence and authenticity. So it
Oh
ticked all the
shoot, I froze up,
boxes.
guys. Can you hear me?
Would I
Yep.
use it in my house? And the
Yep.
only reason I
Oh
would say
no.
probably not is because I had it
Can you guys hear
15,
me?
20 years ago when it was popular with the reds and the sage green. Remember that
Yeah.
phase? It was so, but I love
Sage green and cranberry for the 90s win.
yes. So yeah, I
Yep.
do. Yeah,
Yep.
I
Yep.
love looking at it, but also I'm just not ready to paint right now. My life is crazy, and
Well.
we're not doing that. But
I love your honesty about that in
pretty much.
every single sense. In case anyone wants to check it out, can you give us the color number just so we can go look at it? I think it'd be fun to
Oh
see
yeah,
because you've
absolutely.
talked about it so
You
much.
could just go to ppgpaints.com, and it's on our homepage. You'll say color of the year. It is limitless.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, I should know that. 1091-3.
I'm sorry. I meant the
I'm sorry.
aubergine.
Oh,
Your backup.
well, I'm
Your
between
backup one.
gooseberry and purple basil. which are both a deep aubergine.
Okay. Gooseberry. Okay. And purple basil. We're going to take a look at both of those because I think it's super duper fun to be able to see what the backup is. And it's always good. My gosh, to try to have a backup and see. You know what? I have a feeling that limitless and these two colors would pair
Yeah.
really,
And you
really
will
well
see
together.
those deep aubergine. Our purple basil is
Yeah.
in our the palettes in the trend forecast for 2024. So it's in there. It just didn't final cut. Yes.
It is in there. Okay, Sue, same question. Runner up choice that nobody's going to know unless they're listening to this webcast.
So we
podcast.
had talked a lot about browns, but I felt like it was too close on the heels of urbane bronze. Like that would have just annoyed people if I was like, oh, but also we want like a nut brown as our color of the year. And we had a warm color with red and point, which was a sort of that like baked earth terracotta. So I think, I'm very curious about browns and what their place is going to be in design. So that's maybe something that we're going to pay attention to. But what I would say, like what I put upward in my house, so I have a funny story about blue. I swear that there is some entity living in my house that will not allow me to put blue in this place. Like everybody loves blue, but not my house. I've tried to put it in hallways or bedrooms or areas around the house, and it just does not work. I don't know if we just have too much northern light. I don't know what it is, but it cracks me up because I feel bad. Like poor blue, right? What did it ever do to me? And I just
Poor blue.
can't.
And if you knew, Sue, how many times have you painted your dining room, Sue?
1 million times I painted rooms in this house, and I
Literally.
cannot get
I was
blue in
gonna
here. I think there's like the ghost of somebody in this house that does not like blue and tells me that all the time.
I had the
Isn't that
opposite
funny?
happen. I
So
never,
that is to
never
say-
thought-
No, I think it's
and
real.
but had painted my bedroom a million times, and we were actually, oh my god, this goes back. Remember the decorative painting, the faux finishing? Anyway, we were doing a photo shoot
Yes.
and for a brochure, and so I
Yes.
just used my space because it was easier.
Yes.
And one of the last things we changed it to was a smoky blue and this like metallic Venetian plaster, and I literally went, oh my god,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and I'm like, it changed it to that, and it's been that for God. When did faux finishing go out? 15 years ago, and I love it. Like it's the
Oh
only
gosh,
blue.
yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's it's
And it's
Still
beautiful.
there.
and it's it's yeah, like metallic plaster. But
Beautiful.
I would have never, you would have never got blue in
Pretty.
my
Yeah.
house prior to actually seeing it go up. So maybe I can have my house talk to your house, and then you can get
Yeah,
some
it's so funny, and the whole world loves blue. I love seeing it at everybody else's homes, but in my house, it just doesn't work. It's funny.
Okay, so I lied. I have one more question for you, ladies, because this is my problem in that I live in the world of color all day. So what ends up happening is like it's very little color in my house. We have great backdrops, and our designer Diana does a fabulous job. She's in the middle of recreating our backdrop, which hopefully we'll have ready in the next week or two. But consequently, other than that, I don't do color, which is why I'm always in black.
Yeah.
In fact, our fabulous producer, Leah, and I had this conversation. I'm like, Leah, can I just black? It's my go-to. I have a capsule wardrobe. It's called black. Any piece in black. That is my capsule wardrobe. Occasionally you'll find an olive in there on a really bold day. But everyone says like, oh, you must have the most vibrant closet. I'm like, no, I sure don't, folks, because I'm swimming in it all day. And I think sometimes I just am so saturated by it. Do you guys find it that to your point, Ruthanne, your house is
one
just
room
blue.
is blue.
We found a color. We're
just
going with
one.
that color.
I have
Sue, do
two
you
rooms
find
that are black,
Yeah.
and I
one room is blue?
those-
Okay.
and they've been that way for almost 15 years now, and
Love.
I love them. Like that's my go-to when I'm working with a homeowner. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, you just pick the colors, and of course we don't want to do that. We don't live there. We don't have the same furnishings. And if they press, I say, well, I said I have 2 black rooms in my house, and those are my favorite.
Sure.
Like, you still want me to pick your colors? And they'll say, no, maybe not. And so, but that's like it's for you. You need to pick colors that resonate with you. So no, but I did go through color. I had the aubergine, bedroom, and the sage family room, and the gold, and the red kitchen. And, okay, this is a long time ago, ladies. I'm dating myself, but so I had that, and then I kind of switched to more
No
neutrals,
judgment here.
but I do like dark neutrals. I just find they're same thing. You're working with color all day, and these are kind of just a breath, and Plus all the
Yeah.
noise in the world. It's kind of nice to just come home to quiet, and I have 3 dogs, so
Yeah.
it's not quiet, but, to come down to calm. And plus I have an older home
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
a lot of wood and
Yeah.
stuff, so it's, that dictates what you can do a little bit as well. But we know Sue doesn't have
Neat.
blue.
Definitely. Yeah. Kind of the same
Yeah,
thing.
for sure. How about you, Sue?
I feel like I either need
Yeah.
really, really complex colors with like a lot of pigment in them, or I need like clean slate. Like I'm currently obsessed with like mushroom tones. So whites with sort of a gray or muted undertone, I think are so beautiful. And again, I think that's my brain just like,
Oh.
you need to chill for a little bit, lady, and get some more restive
Yeah.
interiors.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I'm thinking back on, we had Sue on the show, and we'll put the hyperlink to her episode a while back. And I think you recorded in your dining room, and whatever that color was
It's
fabulous.
beautiful.
It feels like what
So
you're
it was
describing to me.
it's a color called taiga,
Yeah.
which my son is going to laugh. Like when we named that color, he named it for me. And it's like the color of the Siberian forest above the
I
tree
love that.
line. So it's like a silver evergreen. It's really pretty, but it's got a ton of undertones. So you just look at it and you kind of get lost in the dimensionality of the color. And that sticks. Like usually I'll try a color for 1 or 2 years, especially in a small space, and then it's out. And that one I've had for a couple of seasons. So it's a goodie.
Sounds it.
It's a good one.
That's amazing.
Now I gotta go look it
That's
up.
awesome. I love it. It was beautiful to see. It was incredible to see. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I know. Now everyone's going to hop on and go Google all the colors that we're talking
yes.
about. I don't want to let you off the hook easily, Sue. You mentioned those deep browns. Do you have 1 or 2 colors from your palette at Sherwin you would want us to
Yeah,
take
so there's a
look at?
color. It's my front door color, hilariously enough. It's called Antiquarian Brown. It's from our historic line, and it almost reads like a terracotta.
Okay.
It's a warm nut brown, kind of mid-tone range, and it's excellent. It's just
Okay.
goes with everything. It's almost like I'm trying to think of non-Sherwin color descriptions. It's like not a cordovan, but like a sesame color, like a deep toasted sesame. So I just love it, love it, love it. And we use it in it, maybe because it's so reminiscent of wood tones. So like if I'm thinking about like a scrubbed oak or a washed pine, it's kind of that color. And I use it so many places.
Yeah.
So that is my current favorite brown
Sounds
that I
yummy.
love right now.
I
Oh,
love it.
0045,
I
I
love
think
it.
is the number.
Okay.
It's a good one.
0045. All right. We're going to put hyperlinks
Thank
to all
you.
of this in the show notes. So if you're listening, come back to the show notes and we'll have hyperlinks to these colors to both Sherwin-Williams and PPG's website so you don't have to go find them later. It's a lot to ask. So thank you, ladies. This has been such a great conversation. I so appreciate your time, your industry expertise, and
you. This
just
has been
your
amazing.
personalities. It's been fabulous.
I
Thank you
agree.
so
What a
much.
great
Yes,
day.
we
So
spent the
thanks,
afternoon with you. We'll have to
Ruthanne.
do
This
this
was
again.
too fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I agree.
Yes.
All right.
We absolutely will. Count on it next year, if
All
not
right.
sooner. All right.
Bye,
Bye,
Katie.
everybody.